Yeah, so now we're going to turn to the wholesale market in China, where we also have pricing, which is the largest volume shrimp market in the world, US being the highest in value, or maybe Europe actually. I'm not sure how it is between the two. And then we'll look at prices for Ecuador shrimp in that wholesale market, and then we'll also look at prices, CFR offer prices from Ecuador to China, which usually takes around 10 weeks to be delivered. So we've got the wholesale pricing in the market, and then the pricing from the offers from Ecuador, which kind of indicate where the market is going. So I'll throw this over to Louis, who's our expert on this, to take us through the situation in with those pricing sets.
Okay, so thanks, Tom. I'm going to go through the wholesale prices for semi-IQF, brine IQF, and brine IQF in 12 kilogram packs in China, because although many of the viewers won't be necessarily dealing directly with China, China is a huge market. And as the saying goes, when China sneezes, the world catches a cold. If the prices in China are rising rapidly, that is going to have ripple effects in the rest of the market. That being said, there hasn't been a lot of movement in prices in China in the past few months. So if we were to drill down into pricing here, we can see weekly prices for wholesale shrimp in China have pretty much stayed flat for the whole of this summer. Now, I'm going to quickly go over to the CFR pricing as well. So this is a price that importers in China are paying to packers in Ecuador. CFR meaning cost and freight China. So that is the delivery price to ports in China. So, we saw that wholesale prices in China were pretty flat. CFR prices a bit more movement in recent weeks and months, but again, if you look at where prices are now, kind of pretty much stable with where they were at the beginning of the summer. So there's been a bit of an up and down, but generally pretty stable. Now, this makes you think, well, not much is going on in the Chinese market, but actually this masks a kind of hidden tension between packers in Ecuador and the buyers in China. The reason is that in Ecuador, packers have been thinking throughout the summer that prices were set to rise. But yet market sources in China were saying this isn't going to happen because for a couple of reasons. Demand in China has been pretty sluggish, and this has been a common theme, since COVID, really, since the end of COVID, where demand has been, we've not seen the boom years of the pre-COVID era. So rather, demand has been pretty kind of flat, and even though summer is typically a peak in consumption, people going out, eating in restaurants, this hasn't translated into increasing prices. And this has been a kind of obviously a challenge for Ecuadorian packers because China is their biggest market. And while demand has been pretty flat in China, raw material prices in Ecuador have been increasing. So this is problematic when your prices in your main market aren't going up, but your raw material prices are increasing. And we can show that if I go and compare the Ecuador, if I can spell correctly, Ecuador farm gate price. So here we have 40.50. And I'm bringing up the 40.50 Ecuador farm gate price. So if we then draw this back here, we can see that around the end of spring, summer, and this is of course in the southern hemisphere for Ecuador, the beginning of winter, prices were kind of, that's a pretty healthy margin with what you're selling into China. But then the raw material price starts to increase. So then suddenly this margin has shrunk, and yet at the same time the price you're getting in China is staying the same. And this is because in winter in Ecuador, supply tends to contract. The farms aren't quite as productive, output is lower, so factories are having to compete for raw material, and there's been a big increase in factory capacity in Ecuador. So they've been trying to keep their factories running and buying up raw material when they can get it, and this has caused prices to rise. I mean, this is not a huge price increase, but it's measurable, and so when you're on thin margins, that has an impact. And so Ecuadorian packers were like, okay, well, we're paying more, we're going to expect more from our Chinese customers, and this hasn't happened. So this has been a bit of a kind of point of tension. So it's okay, you look at the Chinese market is stable, but if you look deeper down and further upstream, and what this means to packers in Ecuador, well, this means that they are perhaps not as happy about it. So yeah, and I'm going to then lastly go on to the Chinese farm gate prices. So this has really been the trend in the import market in China, the dynamics behind it. But then if we go to farm gate prices for shrimp in China, we see, well, a slightly different trend. Prices are always a lot more volatile. That's because of just the nature of live shrimp sales in China, because for those who've been covering the industry for a long time, you'll know that China generally, they consume shrimp live when it's available, and Chinese shrimp producers will sell their product live if they can, because they get higher prices for it. So that tends to mean when you have a fresh product that prices are more volatile. And in recent weeks, I think the most interesting thing has been the increase in prices in China for shrimp. You see across the whole range of sizes we have available. We see that in Guangdong province, which is the largest shrimp producing province in China, prices are on the up the past few weeks, and this is directly related to the upcoming National Golden Week holiday, which has actually started now, because it's also, I think, National Day in China yesterday or today, the 1st or 2nd of October, and that means the whole of China is out celebrating, enjoying meals together with family and friends at restaurants, and that tends to lead to increased consumption of shrimp. And so you see here, of course, live shrimp prices on the up in China. So
but it hasn't really driven the Ecuadorian pricing.
No, it hasn't. So yeah, I think again there was an expectation that it would, but it hasn't, and it's a bit of a mystery, really. I mean, it's often comes down to speculation, in these sorts of situations in the market, even among buyers and sellers, like what's going to happen, and what they are feeling from their own connections in the market, wholesalers, suppliers. The anticipation was that prices for imported shrimp were going to increase, but they haven't. But clearly they have for farm gate shrimp. So yeah, perhaps that's just a preference during these holiday periods for
the live shrimp,
stuff, which is a bit of a premium.
Louis, is it masking a greater supply, domestic supply from China? Do you think is that something that you hear from your contacts there?
That's an interesting question. I think if you look at, if we look on a year-on-year view, the prices for this year for farm gate shrimp in China, yeah, I mean, if we can see here, the yellow line being this year's price trend, farm gate prices have been lower, and that would indicate that supply has been greater, and that is what we hear a lot from sources in China, because there's been this big rollout of these greenhouse shrimp farms, which are more productive, more intensive, and that has then in turn led to greater supply on the domestic market, and that even puts domestic supply in competition with imports, which in terms of pricing, which is kind of unheard of. But I mean, if you were to look at, say, still on the Ecuadorian Vaname shrimp,
maybe compare 60 count to 60 count.
I think I need to on year view. That's why. Sorry, we need to go to contiguous to compare. Okay. Hang on, wait, let's do this way. Oh, sorry, this is a technical glitch, I'm afraid, guys.
Close it down and reopen it up.
So, yeah, that's probably what we need to do. Here we go. Let's just reload
We'll
this.
do it using the front page.
Yeah, let's just move that there. Let's get the CFR China. We've got 80 count. Let's get something equivalent. Well, we've got 60 to 70. That's relatively close in terms of size. Here, so let's zoom in here. You see, there you go. I mean, you'd expect, we put this into dollars, so it's easier to make a comparison. You'd expect that imported prices would be lower than farm gate prices, but we see here actually imported prices were higher than farm gate prices in China. So that means live farm gate prices were more competitive than imports. And you know, when the premium product costs less than the imported product, that causes competition. That's competition for imports, definitely. So that's been something that's been quite new in the past year or two, and that's directly resulting from the greater production from these greenhouses in China.
And a pressure to sell, I guess, to some extent, I suppose, because you know it's a live product they're selling, and you know they've got to harvest and sell, I guess. I mean,
yeah, that's absolutely correct. And because it's live and it's seasonal, that means you do get peaks in supply. And so in the summer months, supply is greater than in winter months. So you can expect that come Chinese New Year, prices for farm gate shrimp will be much higher than prices for imports.